Thank you, she said after the concert was over, and they joined the rest in giving the trio a standing ovation. Thank you for this amazing experience. Out in the open, the needlepoint wind pierced through their insulated layers. Vishnu lit a cigarette, offered it to Ira. She took it from him wordlessly, pulled long and hard, and broke out in a cough. Been a while, she gave it back to him. They walked in silence. You know, Vishnu, Ira began, I had never thought music would be like this. So accessible, so much fun. What an adventure. Isn't it how it is supposed to be? Vishnu said cautiously. Not really. Ira drifted away. The music I'm being taught, my father plays, is a higher art, a cultivated taste, difficult, like meditation. Jazz is a cultivated taste. I am surprised how easily you took to it, that Vishnu says. Maybe because I don't understand it at all. Sometimes I think it is best not to try and understand and analyze everything and just be there for the moment. Vishnu wanted to her up in his arms and kiss her, but he was scared he would put her off, ruin the moment. He was alive to her presence, her arms as they brushed against his, her perfume, and he could see the smoke trail out from her mouth in the cold, forming a halo around her head. They passed a solitary musician at one of the metro stairwells, playing a tug at the heart tune on his guitar. The wind was still blowing sharp and strong, sweeping along brittle leaves, empty cans, and wrappers. Ira moved closer to Vishnu. Back home, said Vishnu, stopping a little ahead of the busker. On a night like this, that is the kind of music I would want to play. The two of them stood side by side listening to the guitar when suddenly Ira turned to Vishnu. She was so close that all he needed to do was to dip his face and his lips would be brushing hers. But she was quicker, and in a flash she had raised herself, kissed him on his cheek, and set him on fire. Every fiber of his body screamed out for her, and with supreme effort, Vishnu stopped himself from grabbing her and crushing her in his arms, biting into those lips that had so aroused him. He looked at her eyes and tenderly kissed her forehead instead. In his bed that night, Vishnu lay awake, savoring the faintest traces of her smell on his lips. Her skin was soft, warm, in spite of the cold. Her lips were warm too and soft as a butterfly. She smelled of strawberry, lavender, and vanilla. Back at her hostess's apartment, Ira tiptoed down to the basement studio. Her father was still playing. Was it Rag Jhinjhoti? Ira frowned, then gave up trying. I can never get it right.
Round of applause, please. You want to do the second one? No, let him do the second one.
Whatever you feel.
Or what do you want to do?
Yeah, actually, there are two segments which we thought would give you an idea of, when we were talking about the two different kinds of music and, the philosophies. So, the segment that I want to read out from is about one of the most important characters in the book, Himadri, who is my protagonist's father. And this is where we're introduced to him and the music that he plays and the world that he sort of represents. So I'll just quickly read to give an idea. Panditji was expected anytime soon. Himadri pressed his head to the slender brown neck of his sitar, ears trained for the faintest echo of a rope string. His left hand flitted from one glove-shaped tuning key to the other, tweaking them till he had the taut, gleaming strings tuned perfectly to the swaras of Rag Miyaki Malhar. With the grace of a dancer who turns his wrists to form intricate mudras, Himadri slipped his little finger between the main strings and the tarab, letting his carefully trimmed fingernail glide over them. The notes poured out of his sitar like a gentle waterfall. It was only after the last note had faded away that Himadri looked up and breathed in. This was the Jalsaghar of Nishi Ranjan Laha, heir to the city's oldest family of ship merchants and gun sellers, now a powerful impresario, a star maker. Crystal butt chandeliers cascaded from the high ceiling. 3 generations of Laha luminaries, including the great-grandfather's pet German shepherd, Duke, watched the guests from silver antique frames on the walls. Guests sat cross-legged on soft carpet and leaned back on fat white cushions and bolsters. The air was heavy with the sweet, sometimes overwhelming fragrances of attar and dhoop batti. Curious musicians and seated samajdars chatted in low voices, occasionally fussing over their crisp peacock-fanned dhotis. Basically, it gives you an idea of the setting. There's a jalsa that is unfolding. And I'll just quickly move to the part where we are talking about the music here. Panditji had still not arrived, but Nishiranjan waved him on anyway. Himadri cleared his throat ceremoniously, lowered his head and did a namaskar to no one in particular. As if on cue, the Jalsakar fell silent. Himadri closed his eyes and began. One phrase at a time, he unraveled the raga in a soulful, elaborate alap. Heads began to nod appreciatively. Himadri knew every single note and the way they flowered when his fingers teased them out of the sitar. It was incredible how the thin metal strings, when pressed against the burnished rib-shaped frets of the acoustic instrument, produced the most wonderful sound the human ear had ever heard. It was also remarkable how he knew he had produced a perfect note when all the tarab strings cried out with a heart-rending, sympathetic resonance. Himadri knew all the pakars of this elusive raga. He knew how the combination of the Shuddh and Komal nishads evoked images of billowy monsoon clouds, lightning streaks across an evening sky and the smell of wet earth. And how, when all the swaras came together, they quenched an universal thirst. That was Miyaki Malhar.
Okay, to juxtapose with the sort of the classical part of the music, obviously the music turns much darker and alternative as the novel progresses, as you guys will realize once you'll pick up the book and read it. So I'm going to read out a bit from the sweetest song, and it goes thus. Ira rubbed her eyes. Vishnu was wearing a long flowing cape with feathers attached to his waist and sleeves, and 2 blue and yellow feathers attached to his headband. She had no idea where those came from. The music continued to lash her and the crowd, and every time she turned round to the sea of faces behind her, all she could see were little sunflowers with vivid rainbow-hued auras. I can ride this, I'm so gonna enjoy this. Ira was just about telling herself when suddenly a large black cloud appeared over the stage. As she looked and looked, unable to tear herself from it, the cloud morphed into a giant bird with claws and hawk eyes. Vishnu was playing his interpretation of Hendrix's Voodoo Child. The bird of prey in the sky began to congeal into a man with an afro hairdo, far away yet cocky eyes and lips blowing out a smoke ring. Look, it's Hendrix, Ira screamed, looking around for someone willing to share the apparition. No one seemed to hear her. Her words did not even reach her own ears. Hendrix was melting away, being replaced by a large, menacing, grimacing skull. The thrill was giving way to cold dread. Ira fell to the ground, unable to take her eyes off the image. She was sinking, being sucked into an endless tunnel, dark, dank, and fearsome. She wanted Vishnu with her now. Suddenly the music changed. The cloud disappeared, the sun shone through, and Ira began to surface again to the sound of birds chirping.